Hi folk, for the month of June 2020 at Jonathan Smart Gallery Christchurch I have an exhibition of new photographs by Heather Straka called Dissected Parlour. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking with Heather about these works. We're going to start with Reverie, Heather. This is, I think, your fourth series of photographs, and what I've always enjoyed about them is that given that you are known mainly as a painter, these are sensational sort of filmic and photographic things. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, originally I went through art school in sculpture and then did film at Ilam. And so recently I was actually the fine artist on the TV program, The Luminaries. I got introduced to all the set builders. We decided to build the set on the farm, and so in it I managed to gather a whole team together basically, and we created almost like these dioramas.
So this is in a shed on your farm?
Yeah.
So this is something in fact that you couldn't have done up until a few years ago when you moved to that property, because you had really constructed and painted a big set?
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of make them look painterly and quite classical with sort of new components in them. So they sort of push things between being like a period piece and being like contemporary elements as well. So like this image is quite relevant now because it's this dystopian world that this young boy is just sort of looking out at, and yeah.
Yes, he looks out from the rubble.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
The rubble we've created.
Yeah. The young white boy, I note, and we'll come back to that a little later. But I also remember in Christchurch years ago when I first met you, you did paint a set. You've long had this interest in recreating a whole environment, if you like, an atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I enjoy about these projects is that, you know, when I'm a painter, I'm limited by my own technical abilities, whereas here I direct. You know, I can go, wow, I need this skill and that skill, and I pull a team together. I mean, there was about 30 people that worked on this.
And that's absolutely extraordinary because as a painter, again, you're working mainly solitary.
Yeah.
And here is quite a large team.
Yeah.
At some cost too. But I imagine you just sort of dovetailed in at the end of the production and managed to get them before they were whisked
We did.
away.
I was very lucky that they were very generous with their time.
Here we are in front of Teamwork. It's the biggest photograph in the exhibition, and I think it's the key work. It's all of the characters, the models that Heather has gathered for the shoot. They're all women, which I think is important. Tell me a little bit more about that, Heather.
Well, it follows on from the previous show I did called Bloodlust, where I had a all-men team, and this time, and in the men team, the men had the armbands. This time, the women have got the armbands. They've got the power. The piano is sort of representing a little bit the Me Too movement, the burning of the piano, the change of the guard. Also in the art world, you could reference it to Michael Parakothai's piano.
Yes, in New Zealand sort of cultural history, the piano has assumed quite significance in the last 10, 20 years, hasn't it? With the Parakothai, with the fantastic Campion film. You must have had that in mind when you chose the piano?
Yeah, I had that symbol in mind, and they're torching it, and so, you know, they're trying to change the status quo, and in one of the other images of the boys, they're trying to extinguish the flame, which is and resurrect the status quo as it was. I mean, I was quite careful about my racial stereotypes in this work. I wanted to create a more multicultural New Zealand.
Yeah. I think you've certainly succeeded in that, and it's a subversive. There's a very subversive undertone here, isn't there?
Yeah, well, they're making Molotov cocktails. Around the time I did it, it was around the time of the Hong Kong riots as well.
Yes.
Which was also, you know, it's an interesting reading of democracy versus communism. So, you know, kind of classical. We've got the little fire engine in there. I always like to put in some sort of product placement, which I did a bit of a collaboration with Pegasus. And so they became the props, you know, that were quite important in the image, the Molotov cocktails.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons the image really resonates with me, is that you succeeded in creating what I would call it's almost like a contemporary history painting. This wonderful tableau that is both historical in its visuals, in its atmosphere, but also contemporary very much in terms of its politic, its range of characters in New Zealand, and in what they're doing.
Yeah, and there's also little bits that, when you really go into the image, we've got the little sailing ship, the merino horns, just some very subtle so you can look through the image. And of course the coal, has been an interesting symbol too, because of course, coal mining and the lack of green and all that. So there's sort of quite a sort of layered thing in it. And I've of course brought back my Burka Babe and some of my painting models, and of course
when you say you brought back your Burka Babe, is that one of the models?
Yeah, I like to use I like to use my models and have a good relationship with them, and so of course I've painted April a lot, and then I pulled in some other characters. This one which I sort of put myself in, just a younger, cuter version, and so she's sort of like directing. So we've got a sort of range of ethnicities, this androgynous character, and as you'll see in one of the others, a very particular character, Genevieve.
Yes, and I think that's another really important aspect to this body of work, isn't it? I mean, we talked earlier about in Reverie the presence of the colonial boy looking out at the future, in the past or the present, and opposite him in this particular install of the hang, we've placed in the work called The Scream. You gave a fantastic description yesterday, Heather. You said, because you've worked with this person before, and you said, I'd like you please on these big red pumps, as best you can, to stand in front of the piano, the decrepit piano, to look up and to, like Elton John, to scream. But within that's a non-binary presence, a really important presence in the body of work opposite the young man.
Yeah, I used Genevieve years ago actually in the Bloodlust works on the bearskin rug, and I was very fortunate to be able to get them in the work this time. And I think the scream was also me screaming, at the world and the art world as well. Thought that was quite important.
In the back gallery of this particular installation, Heather has rounded out the body of work with 5, let's call them portraits. They're more singular than the group or the bigger works in the front, and I find them all very beautiful, but I find they're all quite dark. There's an undercurrent in all of them, isn't there, Heather?
Yeah, well, they're all presenting themselves to the viewer as quite strong characters. Some of them were some of their props. And I kind of was playing around with the idea of that they're parlour portraits. And so, as much as they are very beautiful, they're just a little bit edgy.
I like that directness of gaze. That is a real strength. And in the case of this model, a beautiful old Arctic fox, which is a lovely thing. There's a family memory of mine around one of these. And also, this is a rice vinegar Molotov.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that element of threat, isn't there?
And
or fight back, or...
Yeah, and I've gone with the scale as usual, the 3/4 scale, which, really is like almost a reflection of the character to the viewer.
Yes.
In the scale. And of course, as usual, I can't help myself. I've got to get my dogs in. So Mila is also the final character with my character. The dogs often get into my artwork, and like they used to be in the Renaissance period works, there was often a little Italian greyhound or something in the corner of the works. So I once again like to get that classical reference in.
Almost a self-portrait, perhaps.
Yeah, almost.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the show. It runs physically in Christchurch until the end of June. If you would like any information, a show list, any details whatsoever, please go to www.jonathansmartgallery.com, or I'll hear from you in any other mode.